What's up, Nightmare Nerds? I'm Josh, and welcome to the Nightmare Network presentation of Nightmare Revisited, a podcast deep dive into memorable scares that have stuck with and shaped us over the years. On today's episode, we're looking back at the 1987 quote-unquote cult film, The Monster Squad. Directed by Fred Dekker and co-written by him and Shane Black, The Monster Squad follows a group of youngsters obsessed with monsters and the movies that spawned them. The cast is led by Andre Gower, who went on to direct Wolfman's Got Nards, a 2018 documentary detailing the impact of the Monster Squad and the exponential growth of its passionate fan base since its theatrical release. This is one of the first scary movies I remember watching, and it was also the first time I remember experiencing nightmares. Like full-blown, wake up the entire family, I can't stop thinking about how terrifying Dracula is kind of nightmares. The experience is obviously a little different for me watching it now, and I'm thankful for that. Mike, on the other hand, just watched it for the first time, so it was interesting to get his take. Full of universal monsters, horror-obsessed preteens, and great one-liners, The Monster Squad remains one of the most beloved cult horror films of its time. Let's get to it.
All right, so today we will be talking about Monster Squad, one of our boy Josh's favorite movies. So Josh, why don't you go ahead and get us started by telling us how this lovely movie came into your life.
The Monster Squad. This is probably my earliest memory of watching a movie. This movie came out in 86. I saw it in 88, so I was 3 years old at the time.
And you got confirmation from this from your mom today,
I got confirmation from my mom, because, and the way that I confirmed it was that I knew that we watched it in the townhouse that I lived 3 years of my life in, and we only lived in one other place, so I was like, it had to have been in 88. I had to have been 3 years old, so that's confirmed.
It's so funny because I do the same thing where I try to track where I've first seen things by which house I live in. I think there's got to be a good idea for a horror movie in there. So, yeah. But anyway, continue, please.
No, but I feel like the only reason that it's the first movie that I remember watching is because it scared the shit out of me. I had nightmares after I watched this one. I remember waking up my entire family, including my brother, after we'd watched it. My brother still makes fun of me to this day about it. I was 3, Luke.
I get it, but it's so funny because I had never seen this movie before. Mm-hmm. So you had introduced this to me, and watching it, obviously I was not scared at all.
Sure.
But even still, I'm trying to put myself into that kind of like scenario of being a kid and seeing this and how it gets. Honestly, it felt more fun to me than scary.
It's super fun, and it's super fun, so my brother's 5 years older than me. He would have been 8 years old at the time, and I feel like even still that's a bit young, but I feel like he probably had a better understanding, a better grasp of it. He probably kicked it with his friends in the same way that these kids in the movie do, and right.
It's hypocritical of me to say this because in a few weeks we will be doing the Ernest Scared Stupid Nightmare Revisited and how that terrified me as a kid.
Yes.
But yeah, watching it again, it comes off more camp than it does scary, which led to one of my questions for you. I was wondering, maybe not so much at 3, but even rewatching it over the years, did you ever feel like it was camp at any point, or is that only something that we kind of pick up once we get older and the scares kind of leave our system with things like this?
I think that absolutely now I'm like, oh, this is super campy and like really fun and like not at all scary. It's like really just like a fun little like romp. It's the same way that I watch the Goonies.
Yeah, it has a really Goonies feel to it, right? Doesn't it? It feels like the Goonies meet Frankenstein kind of. That's what it feels.
There's a documentary too about it, and the screenwriter Shane Black, I believe.
Yeah, which is something else we're going to talk about, the fact that this is a Shane Black movie.
Yeah, I think it was him who said like he wanted to do like a Hardy Boys meets the like Universal Monsters.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. I read a lot of Hardy Boys growing up too, and like, that's exactly what it is. It's 100% it. So again, I was 3 years old. I probably and still relate to Phoebe the most, the character in the movie, because as I said, my brother was 5 years older than me. I was always the kid who was like trying to hang around my much older brother and like trying to be cool and like, can I join your group? Can I come with you to the store? Can I do this? Can I do that?
I guess we were talking, how many siblings do you have?
I just have one.
I'm the youngest of 5, so I was like that with every one of my siblings.
Wow.
So it's younger sibling syndrome for sure. But I think one of the things that I loved most about watching this movie was that I was able to identify so much with almost every character.
Yeah.
Like the younger character, for example, I had that itch of like I wanted to be included in anything that my brother did. The kid wears a Stephen King Rules t-shirt.
Are you a Stephen King fan?
I might be a little bit of a Stephen King fan.
Established that yet, but
we haven't established that. But I have literally piles and piles of signed Stephen King books in my room. I'm a bit of a super fan. Like they were me. Like I'm watching this movie and I'm feeling like these are like they're my people, you know, like they were so easy for me to identify with them.
I think you nailed it. Like I think that's why it's remained such a cult classic. You're rooting for these characters. Aside from some of the problematic dialogue and some of the sexist overtones, which we'll get to, they're just relatable. Like we were all kids at one point. We all wanted to be included in stuff. We all wanted to believe in stuff that like our parents, you know, told us weren't real and things like that. And I think too, I want to touch on this a little bit, is that like I think as a 3-year-old, what frightened me was that my life kind of like paralleled their family a little bit. Sean's dad is a cop. My dad was a cop. And they fought, like the parents fought, and they were in like marriage counseling and stuff like that. And not to say that at 3 I was like up on what marriage counseling was or anything like that. But like aside from like the monsters and stuff, I was scared of that kind of thing, right?
That's another thing that impressed me about this movie is I think that it starts and it's super campy and you're like, I know you get the feel that you know exactly what kind of movie this is going to be, and then it surprises you with this little bit of character development that's being sprinkled throughout, and I think it's great, and I think it gives you enough information to be able to put yourself exactly in those kids' positions.
Right.
You know, for example, you know, I had a lot of issues with my parents during my childhood that were similar to what was going on, and once that scene, and you know, it's not an overbearing part of the plot, right? It just gives you enough information about this family to put that into context. And it's enough for me to project myself onto these kids. There's the one scene where the mummy is in the one character. Do you remember what that kid's name's? His closet, and he goes to get his dad, and he says there's a monster. One of the best scenes in the movie, by hilarious. The way. That was it was hilarious, and that's one of the scenes that scared me.
It also was like, look in the fucking closet, dude. Like, you know, like what the anyway.
Yeah, that was a great scene, actually. I love that one. The dynamic of the kid asking for his dad to go check in the closet, and he's opening it up and saying there's nothing there without even looking.
So good.
I've been in that situation 100 times. You know what I mean? Like, I'm convinced something's in my closet. You know, I want to sleep in my parents' bed because I'm afraid, but my parents are like, there's nothing in here, right? There's just a really good amount of character development that's not overwhelming to the fun aspect of the plot, which I think is very Stephen King of it, to be honest with you. A lot of Stephen King books you go into, or movies, and you think, I know exactly what kind of movie this is going to be. One of my examples is Cujo, where every time I read it, I'm like, I know exactly what kind of book this is going to be. It's going to be about a dog. And then the character development is like overwhelming in that book. It really
is, yeah.
It really surprises you.
Yeah.
And that was the kind of surprise that I got with Monster Squad. I really enjoyed it.
And I think too, like a number of things are sort of like a sign of the times in this movie. There's like very 80s, like there's a very 80s like musical montage like halfway through the movie. That's so fun. But this idea, and I think it happens a lot in like some of the great movies that we saw as kids, or maybe because I'm a little bit older than you, maybe I saw more of, but this idea that like the independence of childhood, right? Where these kids are like off doing their own thing, and like regardless of what their parents think, they're like able to kind of like follow their imagination and just be themselves. And
I love that. Do you know the answer to this? Do kids still do that?
Probably.
I guess so. I mean, when I was a kid, I would just take my bike and leave for the entire day, right? Like, that's kind of crazy.
Like that's what they do in this, right? They grab their bikes and they go everywhere. And I mean, you see its influence even to this day. Maybe more of a Goonies influence, but like Stranger Things, right? Like that is like a total 80s throwback.
Do you ever resent Goonies because of your love of Monster Squad? Does that thought ever come to your mind?
No way. No.
Really? Okay.
Well, because the Goonies came out before Monster Squad too.
Right. Sure. For sure.
I think that it's unfortunate that not more people know about the Monster Squad and more people know about the Goonies. I would argue that the Monster Squad is better and a lot more fun. Goonies is fine. I like the Goonies, but
we kind of talked about this a little bit before, but I'm of the opinion that Goonies is a fun movie. It's not a good movie. this is a camp movie, but we'll talk about this shortly as well. But there are certain things in this movie that I was truly stunned about how great they were.
The monsters.
Well, the monsters are great,
Incredible stuff.
but the first thing I want to talk about, possibly my favorite thing in the movie, is the werewolf scene, the transformation scene in the phone book.
Yeah,
amazing. Like,
but that's again like
the
80s were full of werewolf transformation scenes, and this holds up as like one of the better ones. It's so good.
I was shocked because I didn't see it as that kind of movie. It felt like very much a flashbang, now I'm a werewolf kind of movie. You weren't going to really be able to see the transformation, and then they stun you with this amazing phone booth scene.
Oh man, that phone booth scene where they pan.
They pan across the phone. Yeah, it's amazing.
Wonderful
it was
stuff.
fantastic. Yeah. And thing that really shocked me, and it was weird because it put me in a moment where at that point I was like, oh, this is all done on purpose. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's like they're super camp in this movie, which is great. I love camp, and then they get to that point and you're like, oh no, these people know what they're doing. It wasn't it wasn't a budget restraint kind of thing where they have to make it look this way. It was like, no, this was intentional, and that's what makes it even more kind of kick-ass. I think.
We've seen Dracula in however many films. He's pretty scary as Dracula.
Yeah,
that's a scary Dracula to me. And like Gilman is fucking terrifying. You don't see him a whole lot, but
no. So as a kid,
I don't know
which monster scared you the most?
As a kid?
Yeah.
I would probably say the Dracula.
Really?
Just because he's like the one who's after the kids, right? He's kind of like orchestrating the whole thing. And I think the way that he picks up Phoebe at the end there, I think that scared me big time. He's terrifying. He's scary.
He is for sure. I think definitely if I had seen this as a kid, the Gill Man would have scared me the most.
The Gill Man's good.
Yeah. When he pops up out of that lake the first time, I'm like, oh, you're here too, and you're because they don't really introduce him. He's just kind of there, and then he was the makeup on him was great.
Amazing. Amazing.
Which is really cool.
I love that Horace gets the last laugh and gets to shoot him at the end.
Yep.
There.
Yep. A lot of great one-liners in this as well.
So many great one-liners. Actually, wrote a few of them down.
We wrote a lot of them down in our notes.
The one. Okay, so rewatching it, my favorite one was "See You Later, Band-Aid Breath."
Oh my God.
When Rudy unravels the mummy.
Yep. That was really
or near
good.
The beginning. I can't even really remember the context of it, but Phoebe's like, she tells the guys that we're at war with Vietnam. It's in Rambo. I think that's a great line too. Or when she says,
you wrote down a bunch. I feel like I wrote down some too. I can't find
the "Come on, don't be chicken shit."
Oh yeah.
Phoebe line. Great stuff.
So one of the things I wrote down originally was, why are there armadillos? One of the first shots of the movie is like them in Transylvania, like panning around. There's armadillos on the floor.
My guess would be that they were like, what's something that you were probably unlikely to see in the United States of America?
I looked it up actually, and apparently the original Dracula has armadillos in it.
There you go.
Instead of rats, because of some sort of misunderstanding. And so but it's funny to me that the first thing I was like, okay, there's armadillos there.
That's a fun little Easter egg though, right?
Yeah, a little fun little Easter egg.
That's cool.
Yeah, so it just goes to show like this, there's more to this movie than just a fun romp, you know what I mean? Like it's and you know, not to say that any movie's not like that, but it's very clear that the filmmakers have a passion and understanding of what they're doing.
Yeah, and I actually, when I was living in Toronto, I went and saw Fred Dekker did another movie called Night of the Creeps, which I would highly recommend.
Oh, okay. Sure.
Another cult movie that like shouldn't be a cult movie, you know, like it came out around the same time. Didn't really get like a large audience, but like still to this day like plays in indie movie theaters, and like he tours with it and stuff. So I saw that in a little theater in Toronto, and he was there answering some questions. So there were definitely like during the Q&A, there was definitely like people who are like bringing up Monster Squad.
Oh, that's cool.
When we were at a screening for Night of the Creeps. So I feel like it's like people like really love
that's
this
awesome.
movie, but
yeah. That's funny. I like I love the idea of people promoting other things, but not being able to get rid of the one thing that people love the most.
Yeah. Speaking of the one thing people love the most, Wolfman's Got Nards is definitely the best.
Oh well, yes.
One-liner, and we failed to mention it, but that's also the name of the documentary. So go check that out.
Oh, okay. There you go. Nice little promotion. Another thing that I noticed is I loved the Treehouse. And it's such an awesome space, and it got me thinking about like the treehouse in movies in general, like as a trope. There's just something about we have the treehouse here. The one iconic one for me is the Sandlot treehouse.
Right.
It's just such an interesting space.
Treehouse of Horrors.
Treehouse of Horrors is true. It's an interesting repetitive trope, and it's such an interesting space for capturing boyhood, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which and you, so I don't know. I think about that whenever I see this movie, that it's such a thing that repeats over and over and over again. Is that each character in these movies has a treehouse, and it's such a reflection of their character. And I think it's just an interesting way to kind of to show that aspect of their lives. Again,
it's a place to dwell that is separate from any sort of parental unit, right? Like,
yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, it's a separate, like completely separate thing, and I love that. And I think that goes along with sort of the themes that we were seeing in early horror, or like what would you call this even genre wise? It's like
it's
because it's family friendly.
I guess the more I think about it, the more it is very King in its depiction of children. Yep. Which is obvious itself in the one character wearing a Stephen King's Rules t-shirt, right?
Yeah.
And in Stephen King you have these repetitive tropes of kids on their own, right? And
they could be the kids from Stand By Me, right?
Yeah, they 100% could be the kids from Stand By Me, or the kids from It, right?
Yeah.
And it's just really interesting to kind of see it that way, as some great horror movies in the past are kind of just about kids on their own, right?
Yep.
Which I guess is kind of it's sad too, but again that also reflects on these character development of these kids, where their parents aren't taking them seriously.
Yep.
And these parents maybe aren't putting their children ahead of where they should be, right?
Yep.
And it kind of adds another dimension for these types of movies.
It ends up turning on them, the fact that the parents aren't there for like the whole movie, and then they're like, oh no, there are actual monsters that are like trying to kill all of our kids. Let's now jump in and be in their lives, So it's like it's a nice ending. It's a happy ending. It's
for sure.
But yeah, and a great final scene.
I wrote this down because I have to know the answer to this. Is this the only movie to weaponize pizza? Because if it is, wow.
Probably.
I'm trying to think of another movie where they weaponize pizza. I mean, like that's not a light decision, right? Because like pizza's universally loved, and they're like, how can we use this as a weapon?
As somebody who had a nightmare after watching this movie, that could have traumatized me away from pizza for the rest of my life.
For sure.
Yeah, at 3 years old. Thankfully, it didn't. But
Lost Boys did something like that. I think it was more like spaghetti, but like, come on, pizza wins that round every time.
Yeah.
After seeing this, because I certainly did you want a pet Frankenstein?
Yes and no.
Okay.
So Frankenstein obviously is like the sweetest of the monsters, very clearly.
Mm-hmm.
There's no argument there. But he's also Frankenstein. True. And you don't know when that motherfucker's going to turn on you, right? Like that's
fair.
Yeah. But he is like him and Phoebe. It's just like such a cute.
It's so adorable, it's funny because when I saw that, I see that I immediately thought like Alvin and the Chipmunks meet Frankenstein, like and now I'm kind of seeing where these ideas come from. Where everybody should have a pet Frankenstein. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Oh, it's just so cute.
Yeah. That final scene where she has to like say goodbye to Frankenstein.
Oh, it's hard.
Oh, spoiler alert! I'm sorry that I'm kind of spoiling.
It's all right. We're allowed to spoil, so there should be a general. We should put a general spoiler alert.
It's been out for long enough. I feel like.
Yeah.
So
something that we want to talk about, that I would like to spend some time talking about it, is something we both noticed very much while watching this movie. You as a rewatch, me as a first timer. And that is loving movies that don't age well, that become extremely problematic in today's society, and as maybe at the time would have gotten some films canceled. There are certainly some homophobic and sexist undertones in Monster Squad, and so something I thought would be beneficial to talk about is how do we approach our love for things that do not age well?
That's a good one. And you know what? It's been so long since I rewatched it, that I didn't like. I'm 35. I probably haven't seen it since I was in probably early 20s, mid 20s, and it didn't even like back then. It like I don't think I noticed. And it's really like a couple scenes, right? There's a couple words that are a couple slurs that are thrown out in like the beginning of the film that not cool by today's standards, or shouldn't have been by back then either. But and then like you said, the sexist stuff with the Virgin having to read the German scroll to like stop the amulet, whatever.
Which is absolutely we're going to tackle that one first because they're all virgins. like the whole time I'm watching,
it's got to be a female virgin. It's got to be
it's got to be a female virgin,
or a version, as the kid calls it at the end.
A version. Yeah. But so for those of you who aren't familiar with the film, the kind of the climax takes place where they get one of the characters' sisters, a teenage sister who's been spied on by the rest of the group when she changes in their bedroom to read this incantation out loud in order to stop the monsters, and it only works if she's a virgin. And turns out she's not. So they're scrambling and they're trying to figure out, oh my god, like what are we gonna do? Where are we gonna find another virgin? And then they get their Phoebe, the character Phoebe, 5-year-old, to read the incantation out loud. Yeah. That sentence itself makes me feel a little
it's
weird.
It's definitely problematic.
Yeah, for sure. But it's just fun. I couldn't help but think any one of them could read it. You know what I mean? They never specified it had to be a female.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, those for sure problematic scenes are tough to watch now. I'm just like, geez Louise. But
so I like, how do we reconcile loving these movies? Which I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with this film. It's for sure dated. They were using vernacular at a time where it was normalized when it shouldn't have been. Mm-hmm. And I've read articles and certain dissertations about how using the phrase "it's a product of the times" shouldn't be acceptable, because even during the time it was a product of hate and discrimination. Mm-hmm. But for a movie like this that really seems to me to be about inclusion of outcasts, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't seem completely applicable to me. This movie, and this is me speaking, as a cisgendered man. And please tweet us and let us know your thoughts about this. But to me, it seems like the spirit of this movie is about accepting those outcasts, people who are different, mm-hmm. and building stronger connections with them.
Yeah.
So to me, it seems like the film has a good heart, even if it's kind of trapped in a different time period where those words were acceptable.
I do think too, with a lot of the movies that we probably grew up with that probably haven't dated so well, like I wasn't watching the Monster Squad like understanding it as this like problematic piece of work, but more so like just kind of like following along with the story, right? Like and understanding it that way. But yeah, would love to hear about other people's experiences with this film, and like it's interesting to talk to you about it because I know you hadn't seen it until recently.
Yeah, it was the first thing I know. In the first few scenes of the movie, these characters, the two main characters, the two boys, get in trouble at school, right? And during a few interactions with the bullies that are older than them, they call them some very homophobic slurs.
Yeah.
And obviously that was the first thing I noticed. And I think it's a testament to how far we've come today, right? Because I heard those words and was immediately like, whoa.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
it's not.
And I think I warned you even. I was like,
you
dude,
did. And I was
like, stick with it. It's fun, but like, yikes. Yeah. And also, it's the bullies.
Yeah.
I mean, the kids do have a few little comments.
They
have
a few, but it's mostly the bullies.
And you're like, yeah, of course it's the bullies.
You're like, well, and I hate them now because they're using these horrible, horrible words. Yeah. But, this is also coming from a person whose favorite book is It from Stephen King.
Yeah.
And there is a lot of that book that doesn't age well, right?
Yeah.
But at least to me, it's I don't think any part of either of them were made out of hatred, right? Mm-hmm. It was mostly made out of products of the times and, what the filmmakers or storytellers thought would achieve that sense of this is wrong. You know what I mean? Because it is the bullies who say it. That's a good point. And I hear it and I don't like those kids. And the monsters can go and get them. That's fine. I'm totally cool with that.
It's all inexcusable, but the sexist stuff is completely inexcusable. That's just like bad script writing. I wanted to ask you what were a couple of your favorite moments from the movie? Watching it now.
For sure, my favorite moment was, we talked about it, was the werewolf scene in the phone booth. I cannot stress enough how unbelievable that transformation was. It looks amazing. It is genuinely creepy. I really loved the bullet making scene.
Yeah. That's part of the montage.
I just really thought that was fun. Yeah, the montage bullet making scene. Because I had two reactions to it. The first was I had three reactions actually. The first was sick montage. Love it. The
classic
second
montage.
Classic montage. Yeah. The second was that's not how bullets work. And the third was just kidding, they know how bullets work. There's a scene where they get the firing pin in the back and they're like loading and I'm like, to me that threw me in a complete 360 because typically they're like, we're gonna make a silver bullet, but like no one knows how to they make a silver casing and I'm like, okay, well, that's not how bullets work, but this is the 80s and it can't be horror movie, so I guess that's fine. And then I show him putting the bullet inside I'm not a gun person, but I just used it before.
The bullet hole.
The bullet thing. The thing that goes boom in the back. And I'm like, okay, that is how bullets are made. And it was just another one of those examples. Okay, like this movie cared. You know what I mean? Like it cared to make those decisions and make them kind of stick.
Yeah.
And stick out in your mind and say, okay, they put so much attention into this, and it was truly care and love.
Another funny thing too that I caught myself thinking was like, while he's making those silver bullets, I'm like, where's he getting all this silver from? And then they have that scene, or
and then there's that one little scene where
shot where I guess the mom is opening up the silverware. And there's like a few forks left.
And all the spoons are taken.
Great stuff.
Melted down. I can't believe that Shane Black wrote this movie. If we're all familiar, Shane Black today is making Iron Man 3. He is very famous for the Predator movies. He was in Predator 1. He wrote and directed the very recent The Predator. And he also Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. If you ever see, he made that as well. And it's so interesting to me to trace Shane Black from The Predator to Iron Man 3 to Kiss Kiss Bang Bang all the way back to the Monster Squad.
And Lethal Weapon before this.
And I guess you could tell this is a passion project of his, right?
Yeah.
You can feel the love of early Universal horror movies in this, which is another thing I think is really, really great, especially considering they didn't have the rights to all of them. The creature from the Black Lagoon is Gillman, right? And so interesting things like that. But so another thing that I noticed while watching this movie was had to do with another one of my favorite scenes that I think really brought this movie home for me and really made it more identifiable with these characters, is the scene where the main character kid, forgive me for not knowing the names,
Sean,
he's sitting on the roof, Sean, looking over his backyard fence into a drive-in movie theater and watching the movie on binoculars. And I never got to go to a drive-in movie theater, but I loved movies as a kid, obviously. And what my dad would do is he would take me to go see a movie, and we would be one of those people where we would leave the movie and we'd find another one when it was playing and we would sneak in. So we would double header it. It was one of my favorite things to do because I just loved movies and I love experiencing it. And sitting up on that, watching that kid sit up on his roof, doing what I did, getting that free movie experience and having his dad come out and sit down with him and share that delicious looking 1980s Whopper with him.
Yeah.
It really put me in that place, Like yeah. I think one of the really beautiful things about this movie is the fact that these parents aren't there, but a really strong desire to have that connection. And I think that scene is one of those moments where you see how much these parents do care and how much they want to be close to their kids, even though you have these issues kind of standing in their way. And then what happens is these monsters start attacking and it kind of changes their perspective. So that was probably one of my favorite scenes in the movie.
Yeah, I would wholeheartedly agree with you. It's like, that's like a dream come true. Like, as in terms of like a scene happening, I was like, oh man, like watching, like I watched so many movies with my dad, and then his dad comes home, joins him in watching the movie and brings him Burger King. Like, and like I said, my dad was a police officer and was working a lot, right? So it was like, those were the times for me that were like so memorable. And like, I remember we would occasionally go to McDonald's and we'd be able to get McDonald's, and that was like a big deal. There are a few things about that scene that I'm just like feel really good about. Yeah,
it really can't be overstated how much that relationship between kids and parents is really present or not present in this movie, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Because initially I wasn't really even thinking about it like that, right? To me, it's a story about these kids fighting the monsters, and that's what it looks like on paper. But once you kind of dig deeper into it, you see these intricate relationships between these children and their parents, and and I think that scene is a little nugget of what both sides want out of that relationship that neither are getting, But the other thing that I found really, really, really disorienting to me was the movie that he wanted to see was Groundhog Day. And so I'm picturing like them wanting to go see the Bill Murray Groundhog Day. Yeah. During this movie. And I'm like, something's not adding up here. But Groundhog Day was Groundhog Day was the horror movie that they wanted to see. And so in my head, I'm like, Harold Ramis loved this movie, and he wanted to make Groundhog Day based on Monster Squad.
Totally.
So we talked a lot about Monster Squad. We're getting ready to wrap things up here. But the one thing that stood out to me probably the most about this movie is the tragic character and death of the Wolfman. Yeah, like, I had my heartstrings being tugged when he got shot, and I felt so bad for him. He was just a truly, truly tragic character.
Wolfman's got feels.
Wolfman does got feels.
Yeah.
So Josh, 25 years later? Oh God, is it 35 years later?
30. Is it 32 years later?
Oh my God.
Ooh.
Okay, let's rewind. So, being really sad about this number, how does Monster Squad hold up for you?
I would say, it holds up in terms of like how much fun it is as a film. I had much more fun watching it now than I did when I was 3, for obvious reasons. But I think it definitely holds up as a fun little horror romp, and I would recommend it for that reason. Aside from a few of the problems that we touched on, I think it's a really fun little film.
How do you think it's kind of had an influence on you over the past 30 years?
So I think because I studied film, I have turned into a little bit of a film snob. Unfortunately, and I think it's a good reminder. The more that I think about it, or the times that I've rewatched it over the years, that it's a good reminder that like these types of movies are fun, and it's okay to enjoy and love a movie that's just a whole lot of fun.
Even after the whole film school rigmarole and being able to love and analyze film from a theorist perspective or historical perspective, to me it's always most important to remember that film movies, their number one function is to entertain. And I think Monster Squad is a great example of a movie that is here to entertain you.
Yes.
So on that note, we're going to leave you guys. I'm Mike.
And I'm Josh.
And thank you for joining us for Nightmare Revisited.
Thanks for listening to the Nightmare Network podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and don't be afraid to give us suggestions on movies that spooked you out for our next episode. You can visit nightmarenetworkofficial.com to submit your own nightmare to be adapted into a short film on our YouTube channel. As always, at Nightmare Network, you share your scares.